Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lurking for Legends, a live video cast where we talk with people from all walks of the publishing industry. I'm Christy Stratus, historical suspense and historical fantasy author, and my awesome co-hosts are science fiction author David M. Kelly and epic fantasy author Richard H. Stevens. So this is an interactive broadcast, and we encourage you to chat about anything you hear in the show or even ask questions of our guests who will be happy to answer them. And tonight we are very excited to welcome poet Katherine Lawrence. So welcome, Katherine. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we always like to start out by hearing you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your writing. So let's get started with that.
Sure. I live in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. So for Americans tuning in, that's the province directly above North Dakota. And I have been writing all my life, got serious about it when I was about 40. And I have published 5 collections of poetry. And one of those collections is a novel in verse for young adults and middle readers. I don't understand anything that's going on in my world unless I'm writing about it. So that's what draws me to writing. And I write all the time, and I coach other writers, and I love writing.
That's great. And when you say that you coach other writers, does that mean that you coach them in like things outside of poetry? You can coach people on other things as well, or is it like poetry focused?
No, absolutely, Chrissy. I help memoirists, novelists, long fiction, short fiction, and of course, poetry. You know, a really good grounding in poetry spills over and helps all genres.
Sure. Oh, welcome.
I noticed you had a launch event last week for Black Umbrella.
Oh, congratulations.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about that, and perhaps even kind of like how you came up with the name?
Absolutely. So Black Umbrella was just published by Turnstone Press out of Winnipeg, and it's a collection of, well, it's a poetic memoir. And what I should make clear in this conversation is that I'm a writer who goes back to the same subject over and over again. And my preoccupation is the families that work and families that break down. So my Stay, the middle grade novel in verse, is about a little girl whose family is falling apart, and she's desperate to have them stay together. And Black Umbrella is the story of my family of origin and the breakdown that I experienced, watching my parents divorce and the repercussions. So I just, I don't go into this writing with an agenda, but after the books come out and I start getting feedback, I hear people say we need conversations around the so-called divorce narrative for adults and for children. So a Black Umbrella, as I say, it's a poetic memoir, and it also deals with one of the great marvels of my life, which is a very happy marriage and 2 adult daughters who thankfully have not experienced what I experienced. And the title Black Umbrella comes from a very skinny little poem that goes like this. Now you're gone, I can't stop the rain in my dreams. Now you're gone, it rains and rains. So the idea of the metaphor of the black umbrella suggests, a dwelling place. It suggests grief. It suggests a place of refuge, and grief and loss permeate every divorce narrative, regardless of the age of the players.
Interesting. I also just, you touched on your daughters there, actually, and I noticed that on your website it says that you launched Two Fabulous Daughters, and I was just kind of like wondering, being a sci-fi author, where did you launch them to?
I was going to ask the same question.
Oh, you sci-fi people are so slippery, so slippery.
You can say that again.
I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole, David.
So, with Black Umbrella, it's very interesting with the topic that you've chosen. Are you intending this as sort of like a supportive type of book for those going through this, or are you intending it more as like if you haven't been through this, here's kind of a reflection of it? Like, what is your intention behind it?
Well, as a writer and as a poet, my attraction is to language and to learning what I can about myself and the world through language. So once the book is out there, then readers are going to make of it what they will, of course. So I honestly am not, walking around with a placard. It's not a self-help book. It's not any kind of guide. It's my honest response to the way divorce impacts children. I'm a gray-haired child, all of our lives. It's not a whiny book. It's not a book that sets out to blame. It's my story, and I think I'm learning from the feedback I'm getting is that it's a story that people want to hear. There's something always to be learned from somebody else's honest retelling.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah. I think we have a question here.
Yes, I just saw that. I almost bumped it out.
Yes, so Hillary is saying, I noticed that you've won and been nominated for many prestigious awards. What has meant the most to you? Which has meant the most to you, excuse me.
Yeah, thank you, Hillary. It's a good question, and I'll say that I'm not motivated by awards. Of course, it's very, very gratifying when an award comes along. It certainly draws attention to the book. But just this morning, I had a fabulous conversation with my sister, who is a major character in Black Umbrella. And I refer to her as Little Sister. And she said to me that she can't put this book down and that it's bringing back all kinds of memories. And we had one of the most honest conversations about our shared memories. And I hung up from that phone conversation and I thought, if nothing else comes from this book, this is the greatest award I could possibly receive.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's so funny because like with poetry, I don't know about you two, Richard and David, but whenever I hear somebody refer to like characters in poetry, it sounds, different to me than it does in fiction. Like for some reason, I don't expect in poetry to have characters. It may be that I've read a lot of poetry that doesn't happen to include like characters,
Right.
And so like for me, hearing that, even though I've written poetry, I never really thought, even when I included like a character who didn't have a name, I didn't think of them as a character. It's sort of like you almost think of them as just, I don't even know how to describe it. Actually, it's like a nameless thing in your head.
I know.
That's really cool to hear you talk like that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Christy. I do. I think it's the way that poetry was taught. All those dead white guys. but contemporary poetry is full of story, and certainly when I was putting together this manuscript for Black Umbrella, I was casting it as a novel. I was looking for the story arc, and I was looking for tension and writing with tension and there's dialogue and detail and that the line of desire running through every poem and the whole collection. The novel in verse is very deliberately put together as one poem speaks to the next to the next to the next, multiple voices and definite characters. So, poetry is as plastic as our brains. Poetry just keeps responding to our language and to our culture. Poetry is absolutely everywhere. It's all around us.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so one of the questions we normally ask our authors, and poets are authors too, are you a pantser or a planner now, or a plotter? And so with your book, like to me, I'm not a poet, but to me, a poem comes to the poet as an inspiration. You see something, you feel something deeply or whatever, and all of a sudden you got to get it down in words. You're actually writing like a novel or a novel through poetry. So it's good, like you say, one poem leads into the next, into the next. So do you actually plot all these poems down, or do you just derive an inspiration from the one you wrote before? How does that work?
This is a great conversation. I don't believe in inspiration. I just don't believe in it. This is what I do. This is my job. This is my work. So my job is to sit down and write. If I sat around waiting for inspiration to hit, I'd never write. I'd never write anything. So I'm just always listening and reading and on the lookout and for language, and I've always got my themes and my characters in mind. So I'm writing into a body of work thematically, and then when I have lots and lots of pages, then I'll start, I'll spread them all out on the floor, and then I'll start to look for gaps, and I'll start to see, how it's all coming together. So I'm probably, in the language of fiction writers, I'm motivated and driven by character, not plot. If I take it right down to the granular level, speaking as a poet, then I'm motivated by the language of those characters and those situations, and I'm mining for detail. I'm all about the specific telling detail.
That's interesting. I'm a member. We talked before we went on air that I'm a member of a critique group, and most of the people in this critique group are poets. And I honestly don't think I have a lot to offer them other than to let them know how the poem made me feel, because I don't understand poetry and how the words are not capitalized or capitalized, or sometimes they run across the screen one direction, down another direction. I think it's really cool. And if I did that, I'd get probably my books never get published. But I write epic fantasy, so I write 150,000 words, and not every page has to have that oomph. And when I think of poems, I think that every poem has that something that grabs you about it. And so if you're writing a whole novel about, like, the Black Umbrella, about that story that you put in there, how can you get, like, my chapters, I might have a 10-page chapter, and there might be a really neat line at the end that kind of draws the reader into the next one. But how do you get every chapter or every poem in your book to have that special oomph and yet still tell the story?
Well, titles are flags. They help a lot. And I'm actually driving every line, as opposed to, one poem at a time. So every line is driving the piece forward. And well, in Black Umbrella, the first poem in the book is titled "Hooked," and it's a story of how, as a child, the telephone in our home would ring once every night, and my mother let me in on the secret that this was her lover, and I was to keep the secret from my father. And she wore a charm bracelet with a little telephone on it that her lover had given her. So that poem sets the stage, if you will. And then the next poem is called My Beautiful Mother, and here the reader learns about her beauty and her allure. And what I saw watching my grade 4 teacher look at my mother, that's when I realized, oh, I have a beautiful mother, and there's more men attracted to her than just my father. So the dramatic tension is in each poem, and it just builds as I move through.
I find that fascinating. And to me, this seems like so much work. Like, you know, I edit and I think, oh, that's a good sentence, that's a good sentence. But you know, when you're piecing together a scene or you're building a world, you know, not every sentence really has a lot of impact. But like you say, with your poems, every sentence has an impact. So that's
well, Richard and David and Christy, when you have written a chapter, do you read it out loud to yourself? Like, do you then read it and listen for you know how it's landing, for its rhythm, for what else? Yeah.
I do it every Thursday night online, so everyone can sit there and listen to it. Yeah.
So I think that's part of the process that starts to inform about, you know, how it's landing. And in that exercise, I often am finding holes or gaps, you know, what's not working, what is. So we have that in common. We probably have, I know we have lots and lots of techniques in common.
Oh, I'm sure we do, but it just fascinates me when I listen to the poets recite their stuff, and they're just like, bang, you know, in 10 lines, they've just painted a whole picture, and it's got a lot of emotional impact in it, and I'm just totally in awe.
Yeah. It's so amazing. I know when you raised the book Stay, I think it was, I saw that there are some stickies in there, and I, you know, I always like to ask authors when they mark their own work, because I do it too. What is it that you are personally marking? Is it something you're coming back to for like a future book, or does it have to do with something else?
Oh, well, I just finished a little reading tour. Because Stay has been re-released as a reprise edition. So these stickies are still some of the poems that I was reading to audiences over the last few days. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's great.
I should have taken them out for this.
No, not at all. I always wonder, because you know, we all do different things with our work, the way we market and stuff.
That's right.
Speaking of reading tours, now Canada is such a big country with such vast land, and most of our population is right along the 49th parallel. You're in Saskatchewan, and I joked with you before we came on air that what would ever make you stay in Saskatchewan after living in Hamilton? Just because my vision of the weather is so cold up there. It's probably like David where he is too, but and you told me it was your husband that drove you out there, and that's awesome. But speaking of tours and stuff like that, Saskatchewan has a couple big cities, but and then it's pretty well rural. So what do you do if you want to go to book events or book tours, stuff like that? Like, are you flying? Like, Canada's such a big country. Are you flying to different places, or is there enough around Saskatchewan to keep you busy?
Well, so Black Umbrella was launched in Saskatoon, and then I did a reading tour in the south of the province at some libraries and bookstores. Had good turnouts everywhere.
Sure.
And there's a major literary festival that draws in readers and authors from all over Canada. That takes place in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, every July. I'll be reading there. I think this is a fantastic place to be a writer. Huge literary culture. People really support their writers. We have the Saskatchewan Writers Guild that is enormously supportive, and also will provide funding for traveling around the province. And then, you know, in the fall, my husband and I will drive out to Guelph, Ontario, and I'll participate in a writers' festival there and do some readings in Toronto and Hamilton. And the weather will be good, and we'll be in our camper van, and we'll stop in and say hi to David Kelly while we're zipping by Sudbury.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then in October, I'll be out in Vancouver doing some readings out there. So it's a fantastic country. I mean, you fly, you drive, you apply to the Canada Council for help with expenses, cross your fingers, and you get out there and meet your readers. Yeah, you just have to hit the road.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And you actually we're looking forward to seeing you in Eden Mills in Guelph that you mentioned. Dave and I are actually hawk our books there. We won't actually be doing the reading, so we'll be down in Panhandlers Row, I guess, with our little tent and our little books. Please buy our books. But
well, come and hear me read.
Yes, we will if we can get away. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we were down there in 2019, and we wanted to come back in 2020, but of course that didn't happen. So I'm looking forward to that event again. We really enjoyed it.
I know, and that's what's happening with these readings I'm attending. People are so happy just to be out and things are live again, and also my launch was hybrid, which is new since the pandemic. So there's some good things that the pandemic has kicked up.
Oh, here's Wanda. She's a local author here down an hour south of Toronto. We're down in Cambridge, and she's one of our Cambridge authors. And actually, Wanda and I had booths together next to each other this past Saturday at Windfest in Riverside Park. It was
nice.
It was like a typhoon out there all day. We had 2 tents, and one of them broke. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, so it was myself, my wife, and my daughter, who is a children's author. All 3 of us are jammed in this one tent just to place to sell. So yeah, but it was a lot of fun, and Wanda was there. But Wanda's got a question here as well. It says, on the business side of being an author, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with, I'm going to say this wrong, Koto Books going into bankruptcy? How did this affect you in your book availability?
Oh, Wanda, that was a heartbreaking event because Koto Books had been publishing Prairie authors for over 30 years and went bankrupt, as so many regional presses have done. It was just heartbreaking. But you know what? There's a silver lining in every cloud, and Stay had been published originally by Koto Books, and then just recently Shadow Paw Press came along and liked Stay and decided to issue a new edition of Stay. So Stay has a new home, has a new life. It's just wonderful to go back and revisit this book and take it out on tour again. This is a book that I feel so ambitious about this book because I love the way children respond to it. And I have this wild hope that, every divorce lawyer in America, North America, will keep copies of Stay in their offices and hand this book to parents and read it to their kids and help them to get the language they need to articulate what they're feeling as their families reconfigure themselves. So I'm really, really happy to see Stay get a new life. Sadly, it comes out of the demise of a highly respected publisher. But to any authors out there who have gone through what I've gone through, I say don't give up hope. If your publisher closes its doors, then make sure that you buy all of the production files for a very nominal fee. I think it cost me $25 to get all the production files back, and I was just able to hand that over to Shadow Paw Press. So there's always a second, third, fourth life for a good book.
Awesome.
That's great.
I noticed, Katherine, you contributed to a collection of poetry called Apart, a year of pandemic poetry and prose. Do you feel that the COVID years have changed your writing, your poetry in any way?
Well, the pandemic slowed me down and made me recognize how grateful I am to be a writer, because I do not know what I would have done with myself if I hadn't had my whole writing practice. So it allowed me to do more of the coaching with other writers, because so many other people were writing. They wanted contact and feedback. So that was happening. And it allowed me, or I gave myself permission, I suppose, to just take more time with more reading, more theoretical, literary criticism, excuse me, and a greater devotion, if you will, to my writing. So I think at the end of the day, I just emerged from my office feeling grateful, just really grateful to be a writer.
Yeah.
I'm sure you all feel the same way.
Did it change some of your perspective on your writing at all, with the human condition or whatever? Does that make its way? I know yours are kind of stories about what you've experienced, but the human condition in general, I think the pandemic's really opened people's eyes one way or another. Did it influence your writing anyway that way?
Well, the piece that was published in the anthology that David references is about is a story about a very humbling experience, and so perhaps I have been humbled by this pandemic in the same way that I feel grateful for so many things I've taken advantage that I've just taken for granted. So the piece in the anthology, just quickly, is I had ordered a coffee pot online. The wrong size arrived. I called, some warehouse somewhere to order the correct size, and was put on hold and for like 45 minutes. And when the fellow came back online, I was that horrible, bitchy woman on the end of the line who started giving this worker a tough time. I had no business doing that. And within about a minute of me being cranky, I heard a baby cry. It was just at the very outset of the pandemic. I heard a baby cry, and I just stopped in my tracks. I said, are you working from your home? And this fellow was holed up in a little apartment in Montreal with a newborn baby, and obviously his wife in the background. And I thought, my Lord in heaven, what kind of condition is this fellow and this family living through in this pandemic? These were early days. Nobody knew what was up, what was down. And I just did a complete 360. I apologized. My attitude changed totally. I thanked him for his time. He kept apologizing to me for how long it was going to take. I'm saying to him, I have all the time in the world. And as I was standing there, truly feeling I had all the time in the world for this man and what he was trying to do with my account, I looked out my kitchen window and saw for the first time that the cherry tree in my backyard had bloomed. It was in blossom. And I was so busy and so full of myself that I hadn't even slowed down to admire the blossoms. So it was a humbling experience. That's what I wrote about. And that was a real teaching moment for me. And that's the pandemic just slapping me across the top of the head.
That's awesome. So were you ever able to get that poem out to that gentleman, or did you ever know who he was?
No.
No, that would have been really neat.
That would have been really nice. Yeah. No, I never, it's a huge organization dealing with people all over the world. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I know in one of your books, and this is probably the case in all of your books, or maybe the majority, ring finger left hand. This is another one. I think it deals with divorce. I apologize if I get that wrong. The breakdown of marriage from 3 perspectives, it says. And I really I'm looking at what this one reviewer said, and she's saying that your ability to use original metaphors on the day in the life is staggering. And she's got a couple of quotes here that she particularly liked. And she says, like, the husband admits, I didn't make enough money to fill your mother's crystal vases with anything except dust. And then the wife wonders, maybe if I had been more organized, possessed the logic of canisters neatly stacked, maybe I could have made us work. And I just find these lines, the more I think about them, the more sort of clever they become, in my mind. And I have to agree with this reviewer that the metaphors that you're using, the way that you're setting this up, as in like a day in the life, the things we don't necessarily notice, kind of like what we were just talking about with suddenly you hear a baby in the background and it wakes you up in a way. to what's going on. It's, these metaphors based in something we can all picture and we can all relate to and understand, are really hard hitting. So would you call this like kind of your quintessential style that you do? How do you sort of layer that the way you do? It's really, really nicely done.
Thank you. It is my style. That's the kind of writer I am. I pull in, I'm all about like the domestic novel, domestic imagery. I'm grounded in, as I said earlier, the dynamics of families. So of course I turn to the home, and I draw imagery from the nest, everything that surrounds us. And because this is my thing, that I'm alive to these images. They catch my attention. They speak to me, if you will. And so that's what gets woven into all of my work. I'm sure David and Richard would have their own storehouse of personal imagery that just repeats or comes back into the worlds that they create. And I've, my world is the world of the home and the heart, the knife, the fork, the spoon.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I think it makes it very easy to read on two levels. Like, you could read it just on more of a surface level and appreciate it, but you can also read for the depth and almost like, I'm not sure if I can describe this properly, but pretty much just feel as if you are, in that moment because of the clear, vivid imagery that everyone has seen and kind of the emotion that comes through that I think everyone has felt, even if they haven't gone through that situation.
Mm-hmm. Now, may I read a poem that would be maybe 35, 40 seconds?
That would be great.
This is all about you. So if you want to read a poem, you go right ahead.
Okay, so this from Stay. This is called New Math. And so here the main character, Millie, is speaking, and her parents have divorced, and it's brand new. 4 chairs at the kitchen table minus 1 dad equals an empty place I can't subtract from the meals we ate together. Dad's clown around jokes, holding a banana to his ear like a telephone, his direct line to those monkeys in Ottawa, or serving our Friday night specialty, chicken a la daddy, deep fried and golden, Mum's pink apron tied around his middle, white chef's hat from the dollar store, perched on his head. Tara, Mom, and me pretending we're part of a TV cooking show called One Dish Dad. His studio audience laughing for real. It's my job to set the table every night for dinner, but I hate the new math in our house. 3 plates, 3 glasses, 3 forks, 3 spoons, knife, knife, knife.
That's beautiful. That's a really, really, you can feel that. You can really feel that.
So
kids love that poem when I'm in a school. I remember one little boy raising his hand and saying, excuse me, why did you repeat knife, knife, knife? So we had this good conversation about metaphor and, what a knife is not always just a knife. Anyway, they're so smart. Kids are so smart. They get it.
Yeah.
So your poems, obviously, they come from your personal experience and a lot of, the breakup and stuff like that. But do you expand upon that with all the other stuff we see in society now and bring them in there? Or is it all from your experience? I mean, so you see how your family, they split up. But there's so many different families split up in so many different ways, and you see it in the news all the time, and there's some pretty heartrending ones. So do you draw from those things you hear in society, or does everything come from what you've experienced?
Well, the best way for me to answer that, Richard, is to say that my goal is to make these poems my own. And I do that by really paying attention to the kind of imagery that Christy and I were just talking about. And what I believe and what I see happen is that the greater the detail and the greater the specificity, the greater the universality. It's a very, very curious chemistry that takes place. So the more detail I can give, the more accurate a painting I can produce, if you will, like an emotional painting, a tone painting, then the greater emotion there is and the greater it translates for someone who is from a completely different set of circumstances, but they relate. They get it because that emotional vein is running through thanks to the details.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, wait, that's definitely, yeah.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned, Catherine, reading for children. Do you do a lot of work with schools and libraries in terms of outreach and so on?
I do. So that's been one of the wonderful doors that have opened because of moving into this middle grade young adult book. It's just been so gratifying. I'd love to crank out a sequel, but I just haven't come up with that.
Yeah. Do you find that it's easier to teach? This might be a weird question, but do you find that it's like easier to teach children about poetry than adults who might have set ideas? Children are very elastic in that way, where they don't necessarily have expectations, but like adults have already lived life and sort of had their experiences and might have more blocks in terms of writing, for example, or understanding literature.
Kids don't let you get away with anything. Not that you want to get away with something, but I just find that if I'm going into a classroom or reading to kids, I have to really have my act together, because you just never know what one of those little suckers is going to hit you with, right? You just don't know. And in fact, an early version of Stay, I took into a classroom to workshop it with these kids, because I hadn't written for kids before. I didn't know if it was landing, and they didn't like it, and they let me know. They wanted to know why Millie didn't have a cell phone. Why wasn't there any technology? And a couple of kids really took issue with the family. That family is too nice. Why do the sisters get along? So then, and based on some of these questions, I started to think, there's what's up with these kids? Like, they're coming at me with really insightful questions about family. So I said to them, how many of you kids live between two different houses? How many of you have families that have divorced? Over half the kids in the class put up their hand. So I went home and I took the gloves off. I thought, I don't have to, I'm going to bring my family and my family's experience into this story for kids. I don't have to be gentle. They want the truth. They want the truth, just like adults want the truth. So then my job was to deliver a true story through the language and the lens of a child.
That's valuable feedback.
Wanda's asking, you're reading from Black Umbrella at Eden Mills. Will you have other books available for purchase?
For you, Wanda, I will bring more books.
There you go. That's a Lurking for Legends exclusive, Wanda.
Code LFL.
I just want to go back a little bit to you were talking about when that publishing company closed and you had to find a new one, and Stay came back to life again. When it went to the new publishing company, did Stay change at all, or did they just accept it hook, line, and sinker? Did they change the covers on you? How did that process work?
Yeah, it was another great experience. Well, the cover stayed the same, but in the 4 or 5 years that between Stay's original publication date and this new one just this past spring, many things have changed in our world. And so I made a few changes. So for example, I realized, so there's a reference to Siamese twins in the original, and that's just not culturally sensitive language. So I changed to conjoined twins. There were just a few more examples where I was able to just bring in language that was just more sensitive to these times. There's a Cree grandmother in Stay, and and I learned from feedback first time around that'd be better off to drop the last name I had. So she's just Mrs. Irene, but some of the Cree language is that all stayed the same, and that was all approved by a Cree woman who read the original manuscript. So it was just a chance to make some small but important changes like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
awesome.
Great. On the cover, did the cover stay the same, or did they change it?
Cover stayed the same. Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
That's great.
Birds. One bird stays and one bird flies away.
Oh, that's nice.
It's really good.
The other thing that goes on in this book is that Millie wants her family to stay together, but she's 11 years old and she desperately wants to adopt a puppy. And so she eventually does. It's very difficult because, of course, the puppy can't move back and forth between Dad's apartment and Mom's house. And so Stay also refers to the training that had to go into to teach this puppy to to sit and stay. Yeah. So
nice.
So and I love playing with titles. So that one was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's really, and when we do that critiquing group of the poets, I love seeing how their titles always have more than one meaning to them. And
yes.
And that's really really interesting. I try to do that with my chapters, not really have more than one meaning, but have some kind of meaning to them.
Yeah,
I do chapter titles. I know it's kind of a dying thing, but
oh no,
I still
titles are so important. Titles are.
No,
really,
I think so too. I think chapter titles are great, but.
So
I see we're running out of time here, Katherine. Thank you for coming on, and thank you very much for filling in. We got a hold of you, was it yesterday? Yeah. I think you had like a one-day turnaround, and we really appreciate you stepping in. We had a guest all lined up, and he had some unfortunate events happen to him late last week, so he had to cancel. We really appreciate you stepping into the breach here and helping us out.
It was a real honor. I just loved meeting you. Thank you, David and Christy and Richard. This has been a lot of fun.
No, thank you. We really enjoyed you coming on and learning a lot about poetry. We don't have too many poets come on here. We don't mind poets come on, but I know myself, I feel like a fish out of water speaking to a poet because I don't know what to ask you because that's not what I do. But
I think you did very well.
Questions, yeah. So just before we leave, Christy, what's new in the Christy stratosphere?
There isn't a whole lot new since last week. I'm still working on my second grimoire book. It's definitely going to start releasing on Kindle Vella in July. I haven't picked a date yet, but I was working on episode 6 and I had to throw away 1,800 words, and we've all been there, and it hurts. But I spent a bunch of time on it, and then I write this one in episodes since it's a serial. So considering that that's the way it is, spending a few days on it is not too bad. But if I was publishing this live, it would be nerve-wracking, which is why I'm building up the episodes ahead of time instead of publishing them week by week. So I had to throw away those words. It was just not working at all, and I talked a little bit about that on my social media. So I restarted on that, and it was way better. The last time, how it is, I'm sure all of you know how it is, if you find yourself sort of with all these sort of missing details, and then a character isn't really who they're supposed to be, and you start to think, I feel uncomfortable with the scene. What's up with that? And I realized it was just way off. way off, and where it was going to end up going was way off. So that's in the deleted scenes bin. If you are subscribed to my Patreon, I'll probably publish that at some point to you guys only. So I restarted and it went a lot better. So I'm almost done with that one. Whew. So that's my big news for the week. One whole episode got worked
for you
because of all that.
Yeah, that's always heart-wrenching. I was actually I was editing something to do a live read that I had to do at the Cambridge City Hall on Friday, and I realized I was actually editing the story, but I got so sidetracked with all these different things going on. I went to hit save. It asked me if I wanted to save it, and I'm thinking, no, because then I have to change my paperback and my print, my hardcover, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what I've changed and everything else. So I hit no, and then I realized I was working on the copy of my new book, and it doesn't have any other version. It's only got the one. I just did all that, and I thought some of them were really amazing changes, right? I don't know if that's the life of a writer for sure.
So painful.
My response is only 1,800.
I know there are people who've thrown away whole books. Have you had this experience, David?
Dave did about 75,000 words, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I threw away 75,000 words.
Wow. Yeah, that's painful.
So what's new with Dave in the David Kelly universe?
Not much really. Trying to recover from all of the build-up to getting the new novel out, and so that's kind of like done. And as I usually do, I just try to get back to writing the next one as soon as possible. So that's what I'm doing now, working on book 3 of the Logan's World series. So
nice,
awesome. So myself, I've been invited to a local Toastmasters club to do a live read this Thursday from one of my books, and on Friday I travel to Toronto to pick up another 350 books. And then on Saturday, I'll be signing books at the Forest City Comic Con in London, Ontario, which, by the way, is where I first met Dave in person. We traveled down. I met Dave online because he helped me out so much, and he said he was going to be at Forest City Comic Con, and I think that was 2017. And we drove down to see you and your wife, and we met you in person there. I thought it was really cool because I'd never been to an event ever in my life, and to see you, like I saw this real author sitting there signing books.
Real author. It was such a daunting experience.
It was because I didn't consider myself a real author at the time. And it was just so neat to actually see an author signing books and everything else. I was, wow, that's awesome. So anyway, I'm going to be returning to the scene of the crime on Saturday. And I'm sorry, Catherine, I always ask the guests, and I forgot to ask you, what's next with Katherine Lawrence? As far as, have you got something? I know you just released something recently. What's next on your agenda?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm working on a series of creative nonfiction essays on the topic of ambivalent motherhood. It's one of the things that I learned in the writing of Black Umbrella, that my mother came to motherhood with tremendous ambivalence, and it wasn't a term back in those days, but it is now. These days you can find a lot written on it. So that's what I'm trying to get at,
so
in my usual way.
I don't imagine you have any kind of release date set already.
No, I'm still in the research writing phase. Mm-hmm.
And where can we find your books? I see Christy's got a banner scrolling across the bottom of the screen. It's got your website on it. Where else can we find your books if we're looking for them?
Any good local independent bookstore will order them for you from, this from Turnstone Press and this from Shadowpaw Press. But just go to your local bookstore and your libraries. Love to support libraries, or contact me. Love to hear from any of the viewers tonight.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
No, thank you for being here again. Again, thank you for stepping in the breach. So next week's guest is crime fiction author Brenda Chapman. Brenda is a Canadian crime fiction author with over 20 published novels. In addition to short stories and standalones, she's written The Lauded Stone Child, and they give me a French word here. I'm Canadian. I should know these. Rouleau. There's too many vowels there. Rollo Police procedural series, the Anna Sweet mystery novellas, I can't even say that, and the Jennifer Bannon mysteries for middle grade. Her work has been shortlisted for several awards, including 4 Crime Writers of Canada Awards of Excellence. So that sounds interesting. And just so everyone knows, our upcoming live read on July 5th will include epic fantasy excerpts written by authors Allegra, and I'm going to say her name wrong too, Pescatore, I believe. Christy can correct me wrong if I'm wrong.
Right.
And Lambert Cook, who is an up-and-coming author. He actually doesn't have a book published yet, but he has a story written, and he is going to read an excerpt from that. And, of course, myself, I'll be reading from the book I'm writing right now, so it's kind of an exclusive, The Windwalker. So I can't wait to see what characters we nailed Dave with.
I'll be the drunken dwarf, I'm sure.
So anyway, thanks again, Catherine, for joining us tonight. For Christy, Dave, and I, that's all we have tonight. And until we meet again, take good care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.